A federal grand jury indicts 7 former aides and campaign associates of President Nixon.
With Nixon's approval, a group of government-paid operatives spies on the president's political enemies. Nixon's men are caught during a burglary at the Watergate complex. The president himself then participates in the attempt to cover up their crimes.
Watergate, obviously, was absolutely devastating. Having known some of the people involved and watching that whole thing unfold, it was a political scandal of major proportions.
More than 50,000 telegrams poured in on Capitol Hill today. So many, Western Union was swamped.
They just say, impeach Richard Nixon or force him to resign.
As the Watergate scandal shakes the country, Nixon's vice president, Spiro Agnew, is charged with bribery and forced from office.
The Vice President of the United States, Congressman Gerald Ford of Michigan.
Nixon chooses House Minority Leader Gerald Ford as his new vice president, the first unelected vice president in United States history.
Through 73 and on into the summer of 74, those were the crucial 18 months of Watergate.
He did have a front row seat. He could see everything evolve sort of at every step along the way.
And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice.
How can you talk about blackmail and bribery and keeping witnesses silent? This is the presidency of the United States.
Congress became very aggressive at trying to reassert some balance of power in the federal government.
The Congress sort of felt their oats when you've got the president in your sights and you've got the prospects of impeachment. That radically shifts the balance between the two branches.
The meeting will come to order for the House of Representatives to exercise its constitutional power to impeach Richard M. Nixon.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president.
Nixon forgot about the voice-activated recorders.
And a full-time Congress.
He got sloppy.
Is the president being punished?
No, the president has a lot of enemies.
Brussels, please.
You need to remember, Lizzie, that if you have power, people will always try to take it from you, always.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
You remember that?
Donald Rumsfeld, please.
This is a tragedy. That is our president. This is ridiculous.
I actually think this could be very, very good news.
The way I see it, any Republican not touched by Watergate is golden right now.
Ford called me before my plane took off, and I think we're in. Oh, so driving this chick magnet, huh?
You can always take the bus.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour.
Vice President Ford will become the nation's 38th president tomorrow.
Indications are Ford will ask the entire Nixon cabinet to stay on. Ford's choice for vice president, Nelson Rockefeller.
On August 9, 1974, Gerald R. Ford is sworn in as the 38th President of the United States.
Today, in a move which caught just about everybody by surprise, President Ford made the most controversial decision he has made since assuming office just 1 month ago tomorrow.
Now, therefore, I, Gerald R. Ford, have granted a full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon for all offenses against the United States which he...
It came as a stunning action, a shock to the American people.
This means Mr. Nixon cannot be prosecuted for any possible Watergate crimes.
Do you think that the Nixon pardon really served to bind up the nation's wounds?
The decision has created more antagonism than I anticipated.
Ford needs help. He brings in Donald Rumsfeld as his new chief of staff. Rumsfeld then hires a 33-year-old Dick Cheney as his second in command.
I'd gone from being the assistant to Rumsfeld, and all of a sudden I'm the number 2 and the deputy chief of staff in the White House. I'm 33 years old, based on Rumsfeld's word. Jerry Ford immediately gave me his approval. Working for Ford, I got a much closer post from which to observe the presidency and all the pressures that are exerted on a president, the decisions that needed to be made.
One day Ford would have a note sent to Cheney that said, "Can you schedule my haircut?" And the next day it would say, "What's the status on our nukes?"
The first task Cheney and Rumsfeld face is restoring the authority of the president. Congress is demanding that Ford appear on Capitol Hill to explain his pardon of Nixon. Rumsfeld and other staffers plead with Ford not to go to Congress.
What was the risk of his going to Congress?
Precedent it sets. One of the things you have to be aware of and sensitive to, I think, as president, is that the things you do are important not only for the here and now, but they oftentimes can have an impact long term.
You would not expect a leader of the executive branch to go, in effect, hat in hand to the legislative branch and answer their questions. But Ford thought that was important, and he overruled Rumsfeld and he overruled Cheney.
Just 1 month after joining the Ford White House, Cheney watches from the gallery as the president is humbled by Congress.
I'm wondering if, after all that has happened and with further opportunity for reflection, if you do not now feel that you perhaps acted too hastily in this case.
I was absolutely convinced then, as I am now, that if we had had an indictment, a trial, a conviction, that the attention of the President, the Congress, and the American people would have been diverted from the problems that we have to solve.
Ford's testimony is one of the very first instances where Cheney sees the impact of and objects to congressional intrusions on presidential power.
I think there's no question, but those days after Watergate, the presidency was in a weakened condition. Congress sort of moved aggressively into the vacuum that had been filled by that.